We have all heard of the majestic Nile River, the huge body of water that flows through most of northeastern Africa. But what do you really know about the long, crazy history surrounding it? It's not just all about crocodiles and Cleopatra lounging on a royal barge. The Nile has been the center of myth, legend, and adventure for millennia. From ancient tales about chopping gods into pieces and seeding the earth with life from their private parts to Victorian adventures, the Nile has loomed large in people's imaginations for basically as long as there have been people. And no wonder it's pretty much single-handedly responsible for making life possible in northeastern Africa, and giving us some of the coolest civilizations of the ancient world. Its history is a tale full of almost as many twists and turns as the river itself. The country Egypt is called the gift of the Nile, as it is Egypt's lifeline. Without the Nile, which is at more than 4,100 miles, Egypt would have been a desert. The origin of the name, Nile, itself is shrouded in mystery. The Nile is one of the few rivers that flow northward, but because most rivers in the northern hemisphere flow south, the Nile was a source of mystery to both ancient people and later Western explorers. The University of Texas at Dallas explains that the geological history of the Nile River is fairly short, with the oldest of 5 periods dating back 6 million years to when the Mediterranean Sea evaporated. Sometime between 10,000 and a million years ago, a chunk of the Nile took a massive detour from its straight course. A NASA study revealed that tectonic activity in that era probably forced his diversion, known as the Great Bend of the Nile. Nile as we know it has only been around for about 12,000 years. People probably moved to the area from the Great Rift Valley around 5,000 years ago, going on to found the Egyptian Empire. The Nile was super important to several ancient civilizations, from the Nubians and Kushites to, of course, the Egyptians. There were tons of myths about the Nile, which the Egyptians called the father of life and the mother of all men. Several major Egyptian gods were associated with the Nile, including Hapi and Khnum, who were thought to embody the river and control its flow. One ancient Egyptian capital, the lost city of Tanis, was moved 15 miles from its original site at Per-Ramesu to follow the changing flow. Historically, the Nile has provided water for the cultivation of crops in Egypt that led to the burgeoning of many civilizations along the river valley. The Nile is a major north-flowing river in northeastern Africa. It flows into the Mediterranean Sea. The Nile is an integral part of a creation myth associated with the myth of Osiris. Death and rebirth is symbolized by the annual cycle of vegetation accompanying the rise and fall of the Nile waters. Witnessing the natural processes of the earth influenced beliefs in an afterlife. Egyptians believed that the Nile River was the riverway that was taken from life to death and then to enter the afterlife. The east was looked upon as the place of growth and birth, the sun rising, and the west was part of death, the sun setting. At ancient times, the primitive Egyptians settled along the banks of the Nile River, where they built simple houses and cottages for accommodation, grew many crops, and domesticate some animals, and since then the first steps to the Egyptian glory had started. Every aspect of life in Egypt depended on the river. The Nile provided food and resources, land for agriculture, a means of travel, and was critical in the transportation of materials for building projects and other large-scale endeavors. It was a critical lifeline that literally brought life to the desert. However, there is dangers associated with the river Nile also. The river is noted for its fast-moving crocodiles that kill some 200 people every year. There are hippopotamuses, venomous snakes, and deadly mosquitoes. So, step in at your own risk. Some of the rich history of the Nile is also described in the Bible. It was, for example, in the Delta region that the Israelites settled when they first entered Egypt, as described in Genesis, and it was from that area that the Exodus occurred. Today, while the origin of the Nile isn't as much of a source of fascination as in years past, its importance isn't diminished. As How Stuff Works points out, millions of people still rely on it daily, and dams that have been either constructed or proposed to harness its power affect politics and life throughout Africa. Thank you for watching this episode. I hope you like it. Until next time, when we meet again with something more interesting. Stay tuned. Please subscribe to my channel.